Hi everyone, good afternoon. Hi Benga, good afternoon.
Um,
Yeah, are we ready?
yeah, sure.
So hello everyone. If you can hear the sound of my voice, kindly tell us your name, your startup name, and your location so that we know we have people here. Guys, we're waiting for you to introduce yourself. If you are here, tell us your name, your startup name, and your location so that we start. I can see people in the room. If you guys cannot hear me, I will type in. If you are here, please give us your name, your startup name, and your location. I will even want some quick feedback from you guys before we start the session for today. So if you are here, let us know your name and your startup name so that the facilitator can start. Okay, Julius Fame Paddy. Okay, welcome, Julius. So I'm waiting for others. Okay, welcome, Julius. Others, they're waiting for you. People joining the room, we're waiting for you to introduce yourself. Okay, I can see Fred. Welcome, Fred. I can see Romeo. So others, keep it coming. We're waiting for you. If you are joining the room, just give us your name and your location. While we okay, Ayomide. Welcome, Ayomide. Stephen. Please keep them coming. So good afternoon, Olubenga. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes. Hello.
Okay. Yeah, good afternoon. Are we good to start now?
I mean, I'm ready.
Yeah, are you able to see their responses
The comments.
from the
Yes.
comments?
Yes, I
Okay,
can see.
I want to be sure. So I will copy the link now and also drop in the comment section. So those that want to join, they can easily join to ask their question and you can have conversation with them. So guys, the speaker wants you guys to wants to have an interactive session with you. So today, no more shyness. We are dropping the link as many as as many as you guys that are able to join. He wants to have an interactive session today. So we have a lot of you coming up either to ask questions or to answer questions from the facilitator. So you have the link and you can join anytime. Of course, it's not a must to put on your video in case you don't want to put on your video. So you are free to join in. Okay, so we are going to introduce the speaker, and I see more people joining the room. So if you are joining, please follow suit. Tell us your name, your location, your startup name so that we start immediately. So today we have with us once again Mr. Olugbenga. I'm sure those that attended the last session on applying for funds and competitions, you must have met him and I know you enjoyed the topic. So we have him again today. He is the co-founder and CEO of Grandmaster. He is transforming the funding landscape for ambitious organizations in need of grant funding with backing from esteemed institutions such as the US Chamber of Commerce, Google for SDGs, and AWS. Grandmaster is helping ambitious organizations win grant funding to accelerate their impact. Olugbenga has been recognized as Africa's fundraising champion by Origo International, one of the 5 most outstanding social entrepreneurs in Nigeria by the Nigerians NG, one of the 10 outstanding young persons of Nigeria by JCI, and one of the 100 most influential young people in the world by Opportunity Hub. Gbenga has won well over 50 awards, including being recognized as a Mandela Washington Fellow, a Tony Elumelu Fellow, mentor and influencer, Royal Commonwealth Society, yearly West Africa Fellow, yearly Star of Business, among other awards. Gbenga has addressed high-level audiences, including governors, business tycoons, and lawmakers across 3 continents. Once again, welcome to the studio, Olugbenga.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be back. Thank you.
So you have the floor now. So we have other startups joining the studio. So in case you want to ask questions, we can add them. We have them waiting.
Okay. So the format for today is my presentation. Then we take questions. Correct?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Okay. Just a minute. I'm trying to share my slides now.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Julius, good to hear from you. Julius from Nigeria. Fred from Fresh Fish GH. Fred, are you from Ghana? Romeo from Pecode. Romeo, if I pronounced the name of your startup correctly. And Romeo, how is Juliet doing? Because for every Romeo there must be a Juliet. Um, Ochiname Anaya.
Yeah, trust me.
Yeah, Romeo, good to hear from you. Ayomide, how are you doing? Gianni, how are you doing? Okay, so my presentation is going to start very shortly. I see that the slides are loading. Um, so we're going to start any moment from now. Okay, I think we're ready now. We're ready. All right. Um, as usual, I want to start my stopwatch. And yes, so I'm really excited to be here. And the goal of this session is to help you master the skills and strategies needed to deliver compelling pitches and captivating presentations that can drive success for your startup. Right? Essentially, today we want to talk about how you can pitch and win money, like win actual money, right? And even if it's partnerships, um, or maybe you're pitching for an opportunity. It's not always money, right? Because there are all kinds of opportunities you could be pitching for. It could be a fellowship, it could be a scholarship, but because we're startups and we're focused on startups, right? We're going to be talking more about money and how you can raise funding for your money. And this presentation is going to be centered around pitching and around presentation skills, right? So let's move forward. All right, so our agenda is very, very simple. The first thing is the importance of pitching, crafting your narrative, and all the way down to Q&A. I'm here for all your questions. I want to hear all of your questions. And so let's start with the importance of pitching, right? First impressions matter, right? If you want to, let's say you're in a pitching contest now, right? You apply for a competition and you make it to the finals and you're pitching. First impressions matter, right? The way you start your pitch, the way you end the pitch, right? The things that you say during the pitch, the way you appear, right? All of those things matter. And that's why it's really important to understand like how to pitch. You have to understand how to pitch, right? So first impressions matter. You cannot go for a pitch and just look like someone who just escaped from from an asylum. You need to look presentable. I'm not talking about wearing maybe agbada or some regalia. I know even if it's a t-shirt that you're wearing, right? You have to look presentable. You have to look sharp. You have to look smart, right? First impressions matter. The second thing is that pitching can help you secure funding, right? And I have some examples for you. And a major example in this presentation that I think will really help you, because when a well-crafted pitch, a pitch that is straight to the point, a pitch that is on point, a pitch that is well prepared, can grab the attention of funders. A lot of times when startups are pitching in pitching contests, they use big grammars and they lose investors or their audience. And if you lose an investor, or you lose people in the audience, or you lose your judges, there's no way you're going to win, right? A well-crafted pitch can help you win funding for your startup. You're doing an amazing work. That's why you're on this call. Right? But now let's let's go beyond just doing amazing work and help you get funded, right? So that's one key thing about pitching. If you know how to pitch, you're going to win money, right? You are going to win money. In fact, if you know how to pitch your startup very well, for an idea that probably doesn't make sense on paper, you are probably more likely to win grant funding than someone who has maybe an idea that makes some sense, but they don't know how to sell themselves, right? Is it fair? No, but that's how the world works, right? Because the ability to communicate very clearly what you do is also a function of your thought process. Let me take that again. The ability to communicate clearly what you do is a function of your thought process. So if you're able to communicate very, very clearly what you do, it's also an indication that you know what you're doing, right? So I'm sharing this so that we can understand like how investors and how judges and startup competitions, how they like make decisions. Because sometimes people are like, oh, but what this person is doing is small compared to mine. The question is, how did you communicate exactly what you're doing, right? How did you communicate it? Sorry about that. There's so much noise. Sorry about that. Okay. The third point is establishing partnerships, and I mentioned this earlier, right? When you're able to pitch, you can build strategic partnerships, and this can help to accelerate your startup success. Because as a startup founder, you're always pitching. right? You're either pitching to customers, you're pitching to investors, you're pitching to your employees, you're always pitching. And if you know how to pitch, really, you can build strategic partnerships, right? There are founders that are able to poach team members from companies that they admire, right? Team members that they admire from companies they admire. They're able to poach them. How are they doing it? They're selling them a vision. It's not every time that it's all about money and more salary. Sometimes it's just about the bigger vision that you're selling. So when you know how to pitch, you are able to what? Build strategic partnerships. You're able to attract the right talent. And then the fourth point here is you can generate buzz and interest, right? When you are a solid pitcher, when you know how to pitch, you can generate buzz and interest. Journalists want to write about you. Venture capitalists want to fund you, right? Startup competitions, can't have enough of you, right? In fact, let me give an example. There's this grant that we applied for and won the grant, right? And so they announced the second call for that particular grant, and in the material that they gave to people who were trying to apply for the grant, I then saw like the name of our startup, right? And then I'm like, whoa, like they used us as an example, right? So because I was not even thinking about applying for like the second, opening of the grants. Some grants open yearly, some grants, open once in 2 years, but this particular grant, it's like once every 2 years, right? When I saw that they were using us as an example, I'm like, my goodness, like they really love the work that we're doing, right? And that's the thing with pitching. If you are able to pitch yourself, you know how to pitch, you'll be able to generate buzz, attention. You will be the example that that they will use. You will be the example, right? Because essentially, you're conveying energy, you're conveying intensity, you're conveying clarity, the change that you're making in the world, right? So I hope that this is helping you. I hope that you're beginning to realize just how important pitching is. Right? Are we together? I want you to go to the comment section right now. And if we're together, I want you to say yes. I want to be sure that we're together. Please go to the comment section right now. If we're together, if you're learning something, I want you to type yes, 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 yes. Yes, Benga. I now know that pitching is so important. Please go to the comment section. I hope that I'm not missing anything because the comment section is not pausing.
Yeah, guys, we are waiting for you. Type yes if you can hear him and if you are following what we're saying.
Okay. Gianni, definitely learning something. Okay, fantastic. All right. Okay, so there is a video. This video is, I think I may have to probably like just share my screen because there's a video that I want you to see. So sorry, just a minute. There's a particular video I'd like you to see. So okay. We're going to come back to the slides, but let me just share my screen. Okay, I'm sharing my entire screen. All right, let me see. Window. All right. Okay, so I believe you can see my screen, everybody. Can you see my screen? Can you see the video that I'm playing right now?
Yes, sure. We can see it.
Fantastic. All right, let's go.
The sound isn't audible, Benga.
The sound, right?
Yeah, we can't hear the sound.
Oh, sorry. The sound is a bit off. The sound. Okay. I think that you still be able to learn even without the sound. So let's go.
For example, when it comes to a close topic, or even brain, you start to wake up. Often we don't. Nigeria, there's no knowledge what you dogs. We generally have a function and the last one. But there is a 6,000 and more or hands. Because it's hard to look out the right and do the real revolution to essentially in seconds. We will achieve revolution, runs, partnerships, and payment. We just there are good processes at any building and in all over 250,000 sharing experience.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. It's a lot. Okay, so sorry about the sound. I know that the sound, it was a struggle to hear the sound, but what at least did we see? So I think that is there anybody who was able to like hear the sound? Anybody at all? Or was the sound just like very terrible? Please, I'd like very rapid responses in the comment section. Because right now the responses are pretty very slow. It was not audible, Gianni. Oh, sorry. Okay, but at least we could see the video. All right. Okay. So sorry about the audio. Now, let's go back to the slides. Let's go back to the slides. So I'm going to attempt to like give you a super summary of what was in that video. It was an application, U.S. Chamber of Commerce Digital Innovation Competition, open to African startups. So out of over 1,500 applicants, Grandmaster got into the top 5 in West Africa. We got into the top 10 in Africa, and we won a $10,000 grant. Right. So I wanted to ask you questions. Sam was bad, Fred. So sorry about that. I wanted to ask questions about what did you like, what didn't you like, what did you learn. So obviously the sound, the sound was pretty bad. So sorry about the sound, right? But essentially, we're going to come back to some of the things that you probably saw in the video, which are part of the things that you're seeing right now, like your gesticulations, the way you talk, the way you carry yourself. We're going to focus more on some of those things, right? Because it's not just about what you say, but it's about how you say it. So we're going to come back to that later. So sorry about the sound. Now, you want to pitch, we need to talk about your narrative, right? So crafting your narrative. How do you craft your narrative? The first thing is you need to know your audience, right? If you're pitching to a client, it's different from when you're pitching to an investor. It's different from when you're pitching to a potential employee. It's different from when you're pitching at a startup context, right? You need to understand your audience, right? The needs are totally different. If you're pitching to an investor who wants to invest in your company, he probably will not write a check immediately. Most likely, he won't, right? He just wants to know that, okay, is this an investable startup, right? So what is he looking out for? What does it need? What are the expectations? It's different if you're pitching, to a pile of judges in a startup contest. In a startup contest, your destiny, not the destiny of your startup, but your destiny as regards winning that competition is going to be decided there and then. Meaning that you are not going to have a second chance. You absolutely have to throw everything you have at it. You have to throw every single thing you have at it, right? So it's completely different. If it's a startup contest, the judges are looking out for clarity, right? They are looking out for tangibility, right? Clarity in the sense that, like, what this person is saying, right? Do you understand what he's saying, right? Can the judges pitch what you just pitch to them? Can they pitch it back to you, right? And of course, so in some competitions, they're also looking out for, just how confident you are about what you're saying. Because if you are, if you are talking about your startup and you seem timid or you seem unsure of what you're saying, they're not going to buy it, right? So you need to know your audience, right? How you pitch is a function of who you are pitching to, right? It's not every time that you need to maybe talk fast or be confident or be bold. No, of course you have to be confident every time, but it's not every time that you maybe need to rush a little bit, right? If you don't have like 2 minutes to pitch, there's no reason why you should even rush or anything like that, right? So know your audience, right? Know what is motivating them. Next is identify the pain point. Identify the pain point. Let me give you an example. So let's say you are pitching at the startup context and there are 10 startups pitching and you are startup number 9. You need to know that the judges have probably suffered through maybe 7 or 8, terrible pitches, right? And they don't want to hear, another terrible pitch. So you have to be excited. There's just no way about it. You cannot be bland. You cannot be dull. You have to be excited, right? You have to say things that grab their attention. You need to communicate with them. What can they relate with? They may not be from your country. They may not be from your location, but there are things that they can relate with, right? Let me give you an example. So let's say you are a fintech startup, and what you do at your startup is that you help Africans pay for international subscriptions like Spotify, Netflix and co. Right? You give Africans dollar cards, right, to pay seamlessly for subscriptions, right? If your judges are Africans, it's very easy to explain to them that you can ask them a question. Think about the last time you had to pay for your Netflix subscription, right? How stressful was that? But if your judges are white, they probably won't relate because they're like, it's not stressful. I just pick up my card and I pay, right? And then you have to like show them, that it's not the same in your country. That in your country, for example, as a Nigerian, I have to first move naira from my naira account into maybe my cheaper cash or payday, account. After moving the money, then I have to convert that money to dollars. Then I have to load the money on the card. Then I have to pay, which is extremely stressful. And a lot of times it's even far more expensive because, exchange rates, right? By the time you convert, you're probably paying, 2 times what you should have paid, right? So you need to understand the way you communicate it is a function of who you're talking to, right? And then introducing your solution. Of course, you've dramatized the problem. You talked about the problem, right? If you're in the healthcare space, it may be maternal mortality. That's the problem, right? Babies are dying, right? If it's in education, right, you can talk about the fact that Nigeria, I'm using Nigeria as an example a lot. Nigeria has the highest number of out of school children in the entire world, right? You've talked about the pain point. You've identified the pain points. The pain point of your target audience, and of course, the pain point of the people listening to you, right? If they are judges, they don't want to sit through another boring pitch, right? That's a pain point for them. But then, of course, your main focus should be on the pain point of your target audience, the people that you're serving. And then finally, you introduce your solution. Your solution is, the knight in shining armor. Your solution is what, will solve the problem that you've identified. So you have to craft your narrative in a way that it's seamless, in a way that it makes a lot of sense, in a way that the judges can understand. If you're trying to solve the problem of out of school children, right, in Nigeria, right, one way to solve it would be to incentivize those children to go back to school or to take the school to them. Maybe your own is street school. You want to take the school to them, right? Or you want to design like an entirely new curriculum, for those children. A curriculum that blends, football, that blends play, blends it with, the normal regular curriculum, right? Because essentially, it's not so easy to get kids off the street and into the classroom. It's not easy. Some of these kids have been on the street for like 2-3 years, and you can't just drag them to a classroom and teach them A for apple, B for ball. No, right? So you need to now pitch your solution as the answer to the pain points that you've identified. Now, let's talk about the structure of a great pitch. I'm not going to talk too much about this because, in our last session, we essentially touched on these things. But just as a reminder, what is the structure of a great pitch? It has an introduction. It has a problem statement where you're talking about the problem you're trying to solve. Then you talk about the solution. And then you have to talk about your business model. Your business model is, of course, how you generate revenue, right? You're not an NGO. You must generate revenue, right? So that's a business model. Then the market opportunity. And I think it's important. A lot of times when startups are building this slide, they essentially quote one very big figure according to Statista. So there are two ways to do it. There's top down, there's bottom up approach. A top down approach is fantastic if you actually have very solid statistics that you can defend, right? That you can point to. But a bottom up approach, sorry, is more rigorous. It shows that you've been thinking about it. It shows that you actually did your maths. Because if it's a top-down approach, you can quote Statista and say, oh, according to this report by Statista, the size of maybe the educational market in Africa is 13 billion. I'm just quoting that number. I'm not sure that's the actual number. I'm just like saying something to give an example, right? But if you use a bottom-up approach, you can say, oh, how many schools are if you're in Ghana, for example, how many schools are in Ghana, right? Let's say you're selling software to schools. How many schools are in Ghana? How many private schools are in Ghana? How many private schools already buy software or can afford to buy software or can afford to pay for your software, right? How many of those can you then reach? Right? When you do that, it shows like the judges or the investors, it shows them that you've really done your math, that you know what you're talking about. You're not just speaking a number from thin air. So market opportunity is a very key part, right? Another key part is your team. I know you've heard the phrase, teamwork makes things work, right? It's important that you highlight the relevant experience of your team members, right? Relevant experience. Sometimes you have irrelevant experience, right? You have to highlight the relevant experience. So let me give you an example. Let's say you are running a food tech startup, right? Food tech. A relevant experience would be experience in the maybe agriculture space, probably experience in the logistics place. If you have a team member who has worked with maybe a multinational in that space, fantastic. If you have a team member that studied microbiology or studied maybe something zoology, something, botany, anything related to that, fantastic, right? If you have a team member that is an athlete and plays sports, I don't see how that is relevant to your agri-tech startup. I don't see it, right? You can make a case for endurance, but that's a stretch, right? So look for relevant example, right? And if there are awards that are also relevant, maybe somebody is a fellow of one prestigious organization, by all means mention it. If you have team members or yourself, you worked at maybe some prestigious organizations, use the logos on your slide, right? And then financials, right? It's important to have financials. Now, don't use graphs on your slides if they don't go up to the right. If your financials are like this, they're like a wave, don't use a graph. Do not use a graph. Only use a graph when your financials are going up to the right, like this, up to the right, right? My right or left, right? And then the final point here is the ask, right? If you're pitching, especially you're pitching to an investor, you're pitching in a startup contest, your ask must be very specific, right? It must be very, very specific. Like, this is how much we need, right? And this is what we want to use it for. Don't end your slides and leave investors wondering, so what do they need, right? Is this an infomercial? Like, what exactly do they need from us? Your investors should not be asking that question. The judges should not be asking that question, right? And in fact, if it's a startup contest, your work is way easier because essentially you already know the amount you're pitching for if it's a startup contest. So I mean your job is easier, right? So that's the structure of a great pitch deck. Now let's talk about the other aspects of a pitch deck, especially like how you bring your full self to pitch, the things that you say and the things that you don't say. But let's start with the verbal delivery. And when you're pitching, you want to have a confident tone. I'm going to start with number one, which is tone and pitch. You want to have a confident tone, right? And then you can also vary your pitch. What do I mean by varying your pitch? You can be monotone if you don't vary your pitch or tone. So let me give an example. So let's say I'm pitching Grandmaster, and then I go something like this. My name is Gwenga Mbale. I'm the CEO. I'm the CEO of Grandmaster. Grandmaster, we connect organizations, grant funding. Grandmaster has worked with quite a number of startups in Africa. We worked with. What is the problem with that? I'm speaking, but I'm using a single tone. I'm not varying my voice. Like what I'm doing to you right now is, if you listen very carefully, you will notice that I am varying my voice, right? You need to vary your tone and your pitch, and your tone has to be confident. You need to sound like you. The fact that you're confident does not necessarily mean that you need to talk very fast. No, right? You can talk very slowly, but you still have to be confident. Your tone has to be confident, right? So that's tone and pitch. Don't be monotonous. Don't be monotonous, right? Next is speed and pauses. Anytime you say something very huge, let me give you an example. So imagine like you use a quote from Nelson Mandela. You know, Nelson Mandela once said, and I quote, that education is the most powerful weapon with which you can change the world. You can pause. It's not every time. Don't just keep talking, blah, 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 blah. No, 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 no. You can pause. If you say something huge, for example, let's say maybe your startup has done like $500,000 in revenue in the last 3 months. Pause. That's huge. How many startups are doing that even in a year, right? So pause. Use strategic pauses, you know, to draw attention to what you're saying. You should not just keep talking, you know, like a parrot. No, pause. And sometimes you need to speed up, especially if it's like a startup context where you are probably pitching in 2 minutes. Sometimes you may need to speed up. However, my advice would be that limit what you're saying in the first place. Limit your content, because typically what happens is, and I'm guilty of this, you have 2 minutes to pitch. You now want to cram as much information as possible into 2 minutes. You'll not be flying. My name is I'm no, 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 no. If you have 2 minutes to pitch or 3 minutes to pitch, just limit your content. That's step one, right? And how do you do that? Do the math. How many words can I say in 1 minute? You can even time yourself. You can record yourself, right? And count the number of words, or just go online and do like basic research and adopt the average. So use speed and process. And then the third point is make emphasis on key points. Emphasis on key points. When you mention a key point in your pitch, you can go back to that point, right? You can go back. In fact, you can end your pitch with your first slide and go back to the point. Make emphasis. Before you pitch, ask yourself, what are the things that I want the judges to remember? What are the things that I want the investors to remember about me, about my startup? And those are the key points. You have to reinforce them, right? Let me give you an example. One of the things we talk about at Grandmaster is that we make applying for a grant as easy as ordering a cup of coffee. Why do we say that? Because if you've tried to apply for a grant before, you know how difficult it can be, especially for technical grants. Some of those grants, you see like a request for proposal that is 20, 30 pages long. You have a business to run. Your job is not to be reading RFPs up and down, right? So that's one thing that I always want to convey, right, when I'm pitching, is to remind, my audience, whether investors or like startup judges, that essentially we're saving startup founders a lot of time and money, right, by taking the weight of applying for grants, taking it off their desk, right? So you have to emphasize on those key points. Emphasize on those key points. Next is non-verbal cues. When you're talking, yes, what you say is very important, but also what you don't say, which are the non-verbal cues. When you're pitching, maintain eye contact, right? You see that even on this call, as I'm talking to you, I'm trying my very best to look into my camera, right? Even though all I'm seeing is a green dot, but you are on the other side, right? You are on the other side, like I see you, right? Even though I'm not directly seeing you, right? You need to maintain eye contact if you're pitching, especially if it's a physical pitch, even if it's a virtual pitch. If it's a virtual pitch, you have to be looking at your camera, right? Yes, you can look down at your slides, but you also have to look at your camera. If it's a physical pitch, look at your judges, look them in the eye, look them in the face, look at the members of audience. Don't look down when you're pitching. Don't look down or look up or look away. No, right? Look at your target audience. The second point here is gestures and movement, right? And it's important to reiterate this fact, because it's something that I do a lot, and you've probably seen it, on this call. And I'm not doing it because I'm talking about it, but if you've been paying attention, you know this is something I do a lot. Gestures and movement. You need to use purposeful gestures, right? The way to communicate, is to showcase, right? Use gestures and movements. Don't just stand, on one spot and do like this and be like a statue. No. Use gestures and movement to reinforce your points. If you're talking about something, let me give you an example. So let's say you're talking about poverty in Africa, or maybe poverty in your country, and maybe like the rate of poverty is very high. So let's say, let me see, in Nigeria, right? The poverty rate is about 50%, right? Now, like, I'm not sure that that's the accurate stat right now, but for the sake of this presentation, right? So let's say you're talking about something that has to do with poverty alleviation or lifting people out of poverty, and then you now quote that 50% of Nigerians live below the poverty line. You cannot be smiling and be saying that. You cannot be smiling. I mean, 50% of Nigerians live below the poverty line. You cannot be smiling. There's nothing to smile about. You should be angry. You should be visibly angry. Your face should reflect what you're talking about, right? But if you're talking about something very exciting, very happy, right? Maybe like you just shared a case study of somebody, who used your product and service and they achieved a miraculous, let's not use the word miraculous, a fantastic outcome, right? In their lives, maybe like a farmer, that used your product and then they tripled their yield. You can say, oh, wow, I would like to share with you the story of Mohammed, right? Mohammed was a struggling smallholder farmer until, and he was struggling with pests and diseases until he used pestimide, right? And with pestimide, Mohammed was able to get rid of pests on his farm. And just in the last farming period, Mohammed tripled his output. You can laugh. Yeah, you can smile, right? That's a very good one. But you need to make sure that your face, your gestures and movements match what you're talking about. There should be no disconnect, right? And it can be too much too. It can be distracting. Because if you're always moving, judges are asking, like, are we fighting with this person? Is this kung fu? Right? So you also want to make sure that you don't overdo it, right? The third point, posture. If you're pitching, you should not put your hand inside your pocket. No, you should not. You should not put your hand inside your pockets. Neither should you stay on one spot or be slouchy or behave like someone who has not eaten. No, your posture should show that you're open and that you're confident. If you do your hands like this, right, it shows openness. If you close your hand, right, it probably shows that you're not open to whatever it is that the judges are saying, especially if it's feedback, right? So non-verbal cues, right, very, very important, right? You need to show yourself as someone who is sharp, who is confident, who knows exactly what they're talking about. I want to pause at this point. I want to be sure that we're paying attention. Are you learning something? Are we together? Are we together? I want you to go to the comment section now. Are we together? Are you learning something? Please go to the comment section. Are we together? Are we together? Okay, bright lights. Yes, we are together. All right, bright. Thanks for bringing the light. Gianni, we are together. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. Good to know that you're there. Okay, all right. So let's talk about tools and visual aids. And let me start with a story. Bill Gates once delivered a TED talk several years ago where he was talking about, malaria, and he brought a jar to the stage. Now, of course, nobody knew what was inside the jar. He just kept talking. And at the point, he opened the jar and released mosquitoes into the audience. Of course, people were alarmed. People were shocked, like, what? Then he told them that, the mosquitoes have been treated, so they will not have malaria. But, think about it. Imagine, that kind of crazy prop, right? You will never forget that talk. I mean, we're here talking about the presentation that happened several years ago. Why? Because Bill Gates absolutely nails that presentation. So don't use props except they would really, further your message. You should not, because sometimes props can be distracting. What are props? It could be physically bringing your product, right? It could be maybe bringing like a tool, right? It could be like Bill Gates bringing a visual aid, like bringing mosquitoes in a jar, right? A prop could even be a placard. A prop could be a mouse, an item, an object, something that shows, right? That helps to propagate the message, that helps to pass across the message in a way that the judges and your investors can remember. That's a prop, right? Slides. Let's talk about. So I started with number 2. Let's talk about number 1. Slides. It's important that you design slides that are fantastic, slides that are appealing, right? Slides that are beautiful, right? Do you need to design the finest slides in the world? Not really. But you want to make sure that you have slides that don't have too much words on them, right? Your slides should just have the right information. It shouldn't have too much information, right? And then use graphics, use pictures. Be careful with videos though, because you're pitching, right? So you have to be careful with videos. Except you absolutely need to put a video into your pitch. You should not put a video into your pitch, right? Use pictures, use graphs, anything that reinforces your key points, right? And I just talked about videos, right? As long as the video is short and is, improving or it's going to burnish, what you're saying, you can use it. But if the video is long, is distracting, you probably should not use that video, right? You probably should not use the video, right? So let's move on. Let's talk about audience engagement. How do you engage your audience? In this case, who is your audience? Maybe venture capitalists, potential investors, angel investors, or maybe it's a startup contest and you're pitching for money, right? Maybe like me, you're pitching for $10,000. How do you engage your audience, right? Sometimes it's by asking thought-provoking questions. These are rhetorical questions. You're not asking the questions because you expect to get an answer, right? You are asking the question because you want them to be thinking about it, right? Sometimes it's a statement, right? For example, you're telling them, imagine a world where, every child has food to eat, where no child has to go to bed hungry at night. Imagine a world where every single woman survives childbearing and no woman has to die in the hospital. Imagine a world. You're asking questions. Those are rhetorical questions. You don't expect them to answer it, but what you're doing is you're getting them thinking, like, imagine a world. You're getting them thinking, right? You can also encourage participation. For example, if it's possible to do an opinion poll, right? I mean, I know that's crazy, yeah, but it's doable, right? In some cases, we've seen startups. I have seen startups where they're pitching and then they go like, "But a show of hands, if you've ever done X, Y, Z." Right? So let me give an example. I mentioned earlier about how difficult it is to pay for subscriptions, especially in Nigeria here. You want to pay for Spotify, all of this, I think Spotify accepts Naira, but say you want to pay for maybe Google Workspace, or you want to pay for which other one do we struggle to pay for? Google Workspace is pretty difficult. So let me stay with Google Workspace. Now, if you're in a place that has, a lot of VCs, these guys use official email addresses, right? So you can ask a question. Show of hands if you've ever tried paying for a Google Workspace with a Naira card, but did not succeed. You are most likely going to get, some hands to go up, right? So you can encourage participation. On this presentation, in this presentation, one way I'm trying to encourage participation is, to ask you to go to the comment section, and drop a comment, even though like it's really been a bit slow in this session, but that's a way to encourage participation. Just be sure that they're following, your audience is following you and you're not just talking, to the here. Another thing is reading the room. Number 3, this is much more pronounced if you are delivering a pitch to people. You are physically delivering a pitch to investors, angel investors, at a startup contest. You need to read the room. If you're pitching and the people you're pitching to are yawning, they are dozing, you're in trouble, you're in serious trouble. You need to change your energy. You need to figure out a way to get them excited. Otherwise, you cannot influence someone who is asleep. You can only influence judges or influence investors when they are awake, when they are alert, right? So it is a crime for anybody to sleep on you when you are preaching and they are sleeping on you. It's a crime. Why? Because, of course, first of all, you've lost money. That's lost money, lost opportunity. So you need to read the room, observe, read the room. Are they feeling you? Are they flowing along? Are they following you? If not, you probably should skip the slide you're on and go to the interesting slide. All right? You need to read the room. Very important. Now, when you pitch, there's typically the Q&A section, right? Which is, question and answer. I think the smartest thing to do is to prepare ahead of time, right? Prepare likely questions. You can ask your, fellow startup founders, or maybe like investors that you have access to. Ask them, what are the questions that you would ask me? You can share a deck with them, right? This is something that I've done, multiple times where I'm preparing for a pitch, and then I'll send the deck to our advisory board members and ask them for feedback and ask them for questions. And I'll use all of those questions to prepare my own likely questions, potential questions, right? And so I would then come, to that particular session prepared. It's very possible that I ask 1 or 2 questions that I'm not prepared for, but most of the time, I get questions that I already prepared for, and then I'm able to answer them. What then happens if, and I'm going to number 2 now, and the difficult questions. What then happens if they ask you a question that you did not prepare for, or a question that you did not see coming? See, there is no shame in saying, I don't know the answer to this question. You will not say it like that, right? You can say something like, we've not really considered that. Thank you so much for, sharing this. We're going to go back and work on it. Fantastic, right? It may sound as if, is that not an admission of failure? No. You are coming off as a professional. You're coming off as someone who is humble. You don't want to give off vibes of, I know it all. You don't want to come off as arrogant, because if you come off as arrogant, the investors are going to be thinking this person cannot learn, right? Even if this person is going in the wrong direction, they will probably not take correction, right? So it's not a problem if they ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, right? Not a problem. But the way you handle it, will show whether you are teachable or you're not, right? Another thing is seeking feedback after the pitch, right? People in the audience, if you have friends in the audience, ask them, how did I do? How did I do? When you pitch, don't just assume that, oh, it went very well. Of course, I'm the best thing since sliced bread, right? No. Seek feedback. Ask them, right? If it's a startup contest and they've already like judged you and you already know your score, you can even go back to the judges and ask them for feedback, right? As long as you're not trying to influence them or something, right? Seek feedback. Actively seek feedback. Feedback is the food of champions. And so the conclusion here is, it's twofold. The first thing is you want to pitch like a salesman. See, pitching is not just about presenting facts, but it's about doing so in a very compelling, very engaging manner. Pitch like a salesman, right? Think about the last time you went to the market and somebody was trying to drag you to buy something you didn't want to buy, right? How were they, talking to you? How were they sweet talking you, right? I mean, I think about, and I don't know about, what obtains in your own country, but in Nigeria, if you go to an open market, they are dragging you left, right, and center. Everybody wants you to come and buy, what they're selling, right? Some of them will even guilt trip you and say, as a man, they'll say, oh, my husband. You are in the market. You've never met this person before. Suddenly, you become their husband. Like, how? Right? Pitch like a salesman, right? As a startup founder, one of the things that you should be that people should be accusing you of, that investors, customers, everybody should be accusing you of, is that you have sweet mouth. Because if you don't have sweet mouth, then what business do you have, running a startup? You absolutely must have sweet mouth. When they say you have sweet mouth, tell them, yes, I have sweet mouth. Pitch like a salesman, right? You need to be able to sharpen your words. You need to be able to prepare ahead of time. You need to make your pitch compact, exciting, powerful, inspiring. Pitch like a salesman. And then the final part is practice like an athlete, right? Practice makes perfect, and perfect makes permanent. Practice like an athlete. Every single great startup founder today that is known for pitching very well started poorly, right? Steve Jobs was known as a fantastic salesperson and pitch master when he was alive, right? And Steve Jobs would practice for days, right? He would practice for days. And so when Steve Jobs comes outside and he delivers a presentation and everybody's like, whoa, he has practiced for so many hours and so many days that what comes across as flawless is actually a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So practice like an athlete. Practice like an athlete. You should not go for a startup contest and appear as if you were not prepared, or maybe you're pitching to angel investors and then you are paying unprepared. You don't know your numbers, you don't know the basic things about your company. No, right? Pitch like a salesman and then practice like an athlete. Like, you should know your own startup like the back of your hand. It's your startup now. You are the founder, right? You should not be caught on fresh, right? So I leave you those two things. Pitch like a salesman, practice like an athlete. Thank you very much, everybody. Happy to take questions now.
Thank you very much, Olugbenga. It was such a great session. Guys, please, if you have questions for him, I enjoyed the session too, and I believe you guys enjoyed it. And I trust that with the knowledge, the insights, and even the experiences, personal experiences he has shared, you guys will be able to face any pitching competition, even if it's an elevator pitch, for you to pitch within a minute. So I think with this, you should be able to even have a one-liner that you should be able to pitch within a minute or 2 minutes while you still have your full pitch deck. So thank you once again, Olugbenga. So if you have any questions for him, I have sent the link to the studio in the comment section. I'm bringing it up again. So you are free to join the studio to ask your questions, or you can type in your questions in the comment section. whichever works for you. And as usual, you have a minute to do this. Type in your questions or use the link to the studio to join in now. So we're waiting for you guys. I'm sending the link again now. In fact, we would like more of you guys to come up to the studio. So you have the link. Join the studio to ask your questions or your typing. This should be one of the most elaborate sessions on pitching and competition, and then how to present for startups. You are almost ending your ideate program in, it's not even 2 weeks. Next week, your idea program is it's ending next week. So this is like the most important session for this program. So we're waiting for you guys. Send in your questions right now or use the link that I just sent to join the studio. So while we're waiting for you guys, I would like to ask a quick one. I would like to ask a quick one. Okay, Bonga, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can. Yes.
Okay. So are there particular first I would like to ask, will you be willing to share these slides with them
Oh, yeah,
for,
absolutely. Sure. Absolutely.
for
No
those that are
issues.
not able to attend?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, okay. So are there specific startup opportunities you think they should start preparing ahead of time? Let's say ones that are still coming up towards the end of the year or ones that are coming from the beginning of next year, because I know of TEF, I think it starts in January. And then secondly, would you be able to maybe give some extra time, let's say an hour, for all of them to have like a general let's say a general review on this specific matter, pitching and presentation. So we are looking at like a general overview for both ideate 4 and ideate 5. We get them in to ask questions and all. I don't know whether you'll be able to have time for that too.
Okay. Yeah, sure. If there are questions, but I mean, I'll be very happy if there are questions today and we can take them, right? Instead of having another session for questions. But I'm open to that. Not a problem.
Okay, okay. So I think we have someone joining in. Julius Ijibolo. So guys, if you can't come up to the studio, please type in your questions. So once we are done taking Julius now, other people will check out your question. I think Julius has visited the studio. I think it's network problem. Okay, someone asked a question. What is the most important when pitching to investors? The technology you are building or the financial model? Benga.
Hello?
Yeah, we have a question, Benga.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay, so what's the most important when pitching to investors? The technology you're building or the financial model? Uh, the most important thing to investors is your traction. Is your traction. That's the most important thing to investors. It's actually your traction. Because even if what you're doing is not anything tech related or tech enabled, if you are making a lot of progress in a very short amount of time, investors will be interested, right? They will be interested, right? So your traction is the most important, right? So your financial model is perhaps um, a good way to show traction, but especially for a startup that really does not have a lot of traction, your financial model might just be a projection, right? So projections are really not that powerful, right? Revenue is powerful, right? If you're showing revenue like, oh, we've been in existence for 1 year and this is how far we've grown, right? Aha, that's much more tangible, rather than like a projection, like a 5 year projection, because anybody can project anything, right? For your startup, you can project that you'll be a $1 billion company in the next 1 year. It's your projection. Maybe it's delusional, yes, but it's your projection and you're entitled to it. So that's why investors would rather look at exactly what you've done and then judge what you can do based on what you have already done. So traction is most important. Traction and then team, right? So traction followed by team, the quality of the team. So I hope that helps because sometimes uh, VCs will fund a startup, not necessarily because of what they are building, but because of the people behind it. Why? Because those people like have a track record. Like, let me give an example. So it's just like maybe the founder of the co-founder of Flutterwave starting a new company. If he announces that he's leaving Flutterwave today and that he's starting a new company tomorrow, right? He can raise $100 million within a very short amount of time. Yes, because he has shown capacity, right? So traction and team, those two things. So I hope that helped.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we have Gianni. Gianni, can you unmute and ask your question?
It's unmuted. Can you hear me?
Oh yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. My question, in continuation to the first question I asked, when I asked about, okay, I'm hearing myself in two forms. I wanted to ask, in terms of traction, is it more important to focus on my users or the revenue? Because if you're building a social platform, your use case is that your revenue will come from the amount of users you have. So what will be more important, that side? And the next question from there is that how will then the investor see value in the user growth as opposed to revenue growth that we are not focusing on for the next few years?
Okay, so in terms of traction, the one you go with is the one that is more, right? So if, for example, you have like 100,000 users and you have very tiny revenue, right? You should be talking about the number of users. You should not be talking about your revenue, right? But if, for example, you happen to have like a lot of revenue, and maybe, for example, if you are doing like B2B SaaS, you may not have a lot of users, but your revenue is much because you're charging much. I mean, so you should be talking about revenue. The fact that you have 2,000 users is irrelevant, immaterial. But the fact that you've made $100,000 in 2 months, that's interesting. So whichever one is more, that's the one you should be talking about.
All right. And then my last question that I wanted to ask is, in terms of traction, what is interesting to investors? 10,000 users, 20,000 users, 50,000 users, which are the numbers that will catch them the best so that I don't just go and start pitching too early?
Okay, so there's no exact number. You can't say that, oh, maybe it's 10,000, it's 5,000. No, because different startups are at different stages, right? And there are different investors for every stage, right? That's why we have angel investors. So it's not a problem if you have 5,000 users, not a problem, right? As long as you can show that you're growing rapidly, right? Because the startup is designed to grow fast. As long as you can show you are growing rapidly. Imagine if you are able to amass 1,000 users in a space of 30 days. Now that's very interesting, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be 100,000 users or 1 million users. No, right? As long as you're growing rapidly, right? Then investors will be very interested. Oh, you're welcome. I see your comment. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Oluwenga, for the response. So, guys, since I can't see another question, we I'm not seeing another question here. I believe we have internalized what Benga has taught today. So once again, thank you, Benga, for today. So we'll be expecting the slides to share
Sure.
with the participants. So
Sure.
thank you for your time, the resource, the knowledge, the experiences shared. We do appreciate all of
Thank
this. Thank you once again, and you have the best of the weekend. Thank you, everyone. So see you guys tomorrow for the next session. Bye.